Good evening, and thank you for coming out in this wonderful, wonderful summer weather. I appreciate it. On behalf of the Windham Board of Education, I want to welcome all of you to this question and answer community forum regarding feasibility of the high school. I am not going to start calling names because all of you are very important, so we want to welcome members of the teachers from the town, our parents, and members of the university that are here, faculty and staff. All of you, welcome. Tonight with us we have Mr. Bob Roach, that's part of the research team, Mr. Doug Rogers, Dr. Joe Thompson, that are the researchers that conduct the study. With further ado, I want to introduce Mr. Collagen, Bob Collagen, member of the board. Paul Collagen, the chair of the Planning and Design Committee that will introduce other members that will present tonight. Thank you. I have a Bob too now. I know.
Good evening, everyone. This is not a formal meeting per se. It is a presentation and community forum. It's more about people in the community coming together and having a conversation, asking some questions. We have just finished recently a formal feasibility study for the high school. Those consultants are here at the table, as Dr. Garcia pointed out. Mr. Townsley was the lead on that, and we'll begin by making a brief presentation and overview of the study. A couple of ground rules. I'm the chair of the School Planning and Design Committee, and as such, it is a working committee, which means folks come, community members, Board of Ed members, and interested parties to work on specific problems to get to a resolution and then make a presentation and a recommendation only to the full Board of Education. That's what the subcommittees do. And we have ground rules. One of them is if you have a cell phone, please silence it. If you have to take a call, simply get up and go out into the hallway. Also, an important one is whoever has the floor has the floor. Try not to crosstalk. Let's not have multiple conversations going on. Ask questions that are relevant. Woulda, shoulda, coulda is not relevant really for this format. We all make mistakes. We've all stumbled and bumped our toes, and we tried to do better. As a community, what we're looking for in this process is the best outcome in the education for our children and the buildings that we provide them. So, Mr. Townsley, would you like to start?
Absolutely.
Before he does, at some point, there may be questions that relate to how we got here, the history of the study. It's been going on for about 5 years in reality. Mrs. Lambert was the chair of the School Planning and Design Committee before me. She started this process. She has a vast amount of knowledge, so if there's a question that's relevant for her, she may pipe in. Dr. Sewell is here, also has been involved in the process and may have comments. Ms. Lynn Ide is going to recognize people on the floor. I'm going to step back, and it will start with Mr. Townsley. When he is done, if there's a question that is relevant for his colleagues, he'll direct it in that direction. So here we go. I'll have this thing. So whenever anyone has a question, I'll bring the mic to you.
Would you rather I stand?
It's up to you, Joe. Would you like to stand?
Well,
You're a moving target then.
It's just a talking, it's a talking bald head back there. I want to say hello, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting us back. Quick background, I mentioned to someone coming in, this is my 51st year in public education, and this will be the last building I'll ever work in. So be kind and no, I'm just kidding. I went into education a long time ago because I thought it was the right thing to do to try to maybe make things better for kids, and it worked out. I worked in city schools, suburban schools, wealthy schools, superintendent in Simsbury for 20 years. Got called when the chef decision came down, Joe, please come in and help us with this. This is a big deal. How are we going to integrate the public schools? So I spent 14 years there. That's how I got to know Doug Rogers here. And then I retired again. I wasn't very good at retirement. I've done it 2 or 3 times, and I got this request through CREC, as I work as an independent consultant, to come and take on this project, and I'm so glad I did. And I hope what we can do this evening is confirm for you that, first of all, you've got a lot of great people in your school organization, in your town, that have been very helpful in this process by providing information when we needed it. Secondly, I thank you for coming out, because somebody has to look out for the children of the future, and that's why you're here. I had a wonderful team here. This gentleman right over here, Robert Roach from Flower Associates, has been on this project for, I don't know, years and years, I think. He represents everything we need to know about the construction side in terms of what architects do, and this gentleman right here is a senior officer in the construction division at the Capital Region Education Council. And if you're not familiar with CREC, it is an agency that services 35 towns in the greater Hartford area. I went there a number of years ago. There were 700 employees. There's almost 2,000 now. There's 9 divisions, and they do marvelous things for young people throughout the greater Hartford area. So this is the group that I had the privilege of working with, and they're going to I'll give them an opportunity to talk here in just a few moments about what they've done and where we're going. And if you want to flip to the next slide, I might have these in order. Scope of the work says pretty clearly what we had to do in terms of analyzing the impact of potential options, and there were 3. It was very specific. The study was generated by the folks here in the Board of Education and Council, I suspect, and we followed that in terms of what we had to do in order to collect data to help you make the right decisions for your community. One was to actually build as new. Another was to demolish part of the high school. And the third one was to make a decision about closing the high school and hosting and sending the students to area high schools, called a host process. I've had experience with that with other school districts around the state, and quite frankly, there are a number of school districts that are facing a couple issues. One, declining support financially. Secondly, maybe their school is too small, and maybe they would benefit by sending their students to other schools and paying a tuition. I've done a number of those projects around the state. And most recently, I just finished one, and they chose after the study, once they looked at the cost analysis, it wasn't a major cost savings. It might have been a great deal, a number of increases in program development for their students if they chose not to go forward with it. You may or may not know that nationally there's a decline in the birth rate, and school districts around the nation, and I've been involved in a number of those recently, what are we going to do with all our buildings at the elementary level? And what choices do we have? And basically I get called in to work with those projects. But in this case, I'll tell you exactly how I approached this issue of, are there school districts in the surrounding area that would take your students? Now, I approached them all these about the same way. Number one, I met with a committee first, and it was clear in terms of what was in line, because it pretty well is defined by your organization. And I said I will identify the number of school districts within a 20-mile radius. And first thing I do is agree that these are the schools, and the committee said, yes, we think those are the right schools. That process started in, I believe, January or February. And the way it works is I call the superintendent up. I tell them your community is considering sending students to high schools. Would you, at this time, be able to tell me whether, number one, do you take tuition-paying students now? And two, do you want to continue the discussion about potentially taking students in the year 2018-19? Not the year prior, because your local Board of Education is working on the budget for that year. So it was 2018-19. And I'll show you later, of the 12 school districts, they varied from, we could take 100. Others said, we can't take any. Some said, give me more time. I will tell you what was unique for me in this project it was a unique time for public education in the state. Many of these superintendents were saying, Joe, I don't know what our state funding is going to be for education. As you know, we were waiting for the state budget to come out. It may come out, I guess, sometime this week, but most school districts know what that number is by now. The second part was there was a move for your local districts and all local districts to pay 1% of the teacher's retirement. And so again, they said, I don't know how many dollars are going to go out the door for us. So it took some time, and I revisited all of them again in April to see if, in fact, they were still on board, and they were. They didn't ask me a lot of questions. They can collect all the data they need about your school district right online, so that's not an issue. I would say of the school districts that said we'll take students, they were very enthusiastic about it. And again, two reasons. One, some of them have a number of empty seats at the high school, and their own districts are saying our costs maintain themselves. If we have revenue coming in, maybe that'll offset our local costs. If in fact the project was going to go forward with a great deal more work after this, I will tell you what would go into that. But you may know by now that our original report that we gave to you is that of the 559 potential students that would go to a host magnet school or host magnet schools, there was only 150 seats that were offered that were available for the 2018-19 school year. Now again, remember those boards, or those superintendents have to go back to their local board of education for approval. And secondly, some of these school districts are regional school districts, which means that more than one community has to be involved in this discussion. So at this point, that's not an option for your community for the 2018-19 school year. Could it be an option sometime in the future? Possibly. I don't know. But that's not one of the three options that I mentioned earlier that's available to you in this community. Any questions at this point for me before I move on?
Yeah.
Sure.
You mentioned some said they could take our students and some said they couldn't. That's not what your graph says in there.
The graph said clearly, I have it up here if you want, some school districts said they would not take students. Some said we cannot. Norwich Free Academy, as I recall, said we'll take 50. Other school districts, some of them said we cannot make a commitment for the 2018-19 school year.
You can't make a commitment doesn't mean you can't take any.
They would not take any for that year.
But they're interested.
They're interested, yeah. I have people that would say, we're interested, but we're not going to take any, we can't make any commitment for 2018-19. I can show you the numbers here and the schools specifically who said that, yeah. Yep, good, all right. Any questions about any of that? Okay. Let's move into our next slide, whatever that might be. What we got up there? Project major project for future project. This deals, by the way, you know that we did provide a report on June the 1st, so some of this is repetitive. But in terms of the approach, phase one facility study, data gathering, we did an analysis in terms of those school districts that in the host portion. The data analysis that dealt with build as new and or demolished part of the high school will be covered in just a couple of minutes by these two gentlemen behind me. The referendum services and the state funding and all that comes back through both these gentlemen also, and they'll be talking about that in a moment or two. So do we turn the platform over to you two at this moment?
Sure.
Okay.
Stand or sit, it's up to you.
Thanks, Joe. Before we got too into depth on each of the options, we just wanted to go over the overview of the process of how we compiled the report. So we had 4 phases. The first part was gathering all the data, working with the town, and working with the state information that we could get to get our initial information. And then, Joe, in the case of looking at other schools, confirming that information as in terms of your building, your capacity, your current enrollment, and most importantly, do you have an interest in taking students? In the case of looking at this existing building, it's doing a program analysis. It's looking at the space that you have. What does the state say the capacity is for the space? How many students do you currently have? Because if you're only 50% full, the state's going to say, we're taking 50% of your reimbursement and not giving it to you. So those are the kinds of things we're going to talk about in those options. And then meeting with, updating the facility that Fryer had done back in 2012, just looking at this building and what kind of condition it's in. So when we're looking at renovate like new or only using portions of the facility, we can give a little bit more depth on those options and attribute cost to those. And then meeting with all the committees and compiling all the information. And then once we have all the information, putting it together, looking at simulations of what those options would look like, and looking into tuition, transportation in the cases of the option 3, which Joe mentioned, which would be closing the high school, sending the students outward. And with all of these options, what is the cost to the town of Windham? What's the bottom line? What can you expect in state funding? What can you expect to pay, the town would have to pay and be borne by the taxpayers? And then finally, the final report, which you're talking about now, and if there's options to move on to the next steps. If you decide to move forward with one of these options, we can talk about working with the project manager, working with the state to look at final estimates and grant funding for each option. And with each option, here's the data we gathered. So option 1, renovate the high school like new. Option 2, demolish portions of the high school and then right-size the high school for the population you currently have in order to maximize your state reimbursement. And option 3, closing the high school and redistricting students outward. So we looked at some of the data sources we had, transportation data, updating the student enrollment, student placement data, getting all the district and state information, doing interviews with town staff or with other school districts, and putting it all together into a study. In the case of option 3, there was a lot more data required because if we're staying in the high school, we don't need to look at transportation costs, and we don't need to look at student placement and things of that nature. If anyone has any questions as I'm talking, please raise your hand. So the first option we're looking at was option 3, which Joe talked about. So he looked at 12 school districts within a 20-mile radius that were targeted, and they're listed here: Bacon Academy, Bolton High School, Coventry High School, E.O. Smith, Lyman Memorial, Manchester High School, Norwich Free Academy, Ram, Towland, Stafford High School, Plainfield High School, and Parish Hill. And he interviewed the superintendents that he said. He was asking, if they have tuition costs, what are they now? What is the tuition charge? Is there an interest in accepting the students, which he spoke to? And if interested, how many students could they take in the 18-19 school year?
I'm just going to add a little bit to this in terms of doing a cost analysis. Transportation is really what drives the cost for hosting out your students. Let's think about it for a second. If all the high school students were able to, I'm sorry?
You need to pull the mic a little
Closer. Is this better? The issue about doing a simulation on cost addresses a number of issues, but most importantly is the whole issue of transportation. Think about it for a second. If all the students in this high school were to go to another high school, number one, they can't. There's too many. But let's assume they could go to 3 or 4. You have to provide transportations from their homes to those locations, and now you have increased the number of buses that you need. Many of them will travel with fewer than 60 students. It will impact, it's kind of a domino effect, it will impact potentially your middle school, your elementary schools, and most importantly, there's not a school district out there, nor would you ever want this to happen, that would not offer this to you if you didn't provide a late bus, meaning when school is over, those youngsters need to be part of the entire school. And I've had one superintendent, I said, I won't take students unless there's a late bus. Now, a late bus is negotiable in terms of who pays for it, and the transportation, if you're going to 4 or 5 or more school districts, becomes significantly higher. A perfect storm would be, if you wanted to do this, all the kids could go to one high school, maybe 2 or 3, all in close proximity to each other, which reduced some of your costs. So transportation is the significant issue. If you were to go further with this, the rest of the study would include an analysis of all the programs that are available in all the various host schools, and you as a board or your community would evaluate whether in fact those programs and services will provide what you need for your community. The other issue that always pops up is the cost of special education. I like to say it's net zero. Whatever you're paying now, you'll pay in the other school district. It doesn't always work that way because the planning and placement team will meet in the host school district, which for some parents who don't have cars is an issue. Having worked with correct magnet schools for 12 or 13 years, we realized how many parents couldn't get to the magnet schools. So we opened on Albany Avenue in the Y a family center where we could offer programs there for parents and because they couldn't get elsewhere. So a tremendous amount of work and effort would go into this. If you were to approach it again, the first year you could ever approach it, in my opinion, would be fiscal year 1920. And you may or may not get the same answers that I received during this past current year. Okay, so we ran the simulations. You'll see in there it's approximately $150,000 savings if we were to go to those host schools. Quite frankly, I presented to the Board of Education, and it's available to all of you. I think a 27 or a 30-page document was research that we did on the entire topic of school closings across America and what it meant and why were they occurring and was there a benefit. And almost to every one of them, there wasn't major savings for most school districts when they did that, and they closed them for other reasons, quite frankly. And it tends to take place more in rural America. Part of the study says, what's the social and economic impact on a community? A lot of data in that research document. If you don't have it, I've got extra copies, and we'll get you extra copies. The smaller the community, I grew up in Ohio. I know you thought I came from New York or New Jersey, but I came from Ohio in a very small town. And when those schools closed, which they did, we had county government, they just made a decision, a major impact, because a lot of the teachers worked in town. And a lot of things happened to people who felt they were losing something in not having a basketball team or a football team and all those good things. So those are part of what goes into a discussion if, in fact, you enter into another discussion later on about what's it mean to seek a host high school. And I'll say one last thing to you. Should you go further in this in the future, it's not only the issue of how far away the school is. By the way, it's the travel time, quite frankly. It's not so much how far it is. Once you have multiple school choices, your board has the challenge and the responsibility to determine which schools, which youngsters will get. In terms, is there a lottery system? Do people get to evaluate each of those schools? That's true in correct schools and magnet schools all the time. So there's many layers to this. And this is my last day at the prom, but if in fact at some point you want to go further, you could call me, but quite frankly, there's a lot of other things that would have to be done before you could move down this road.
Question, previous slide,
Yes.
the previous, the last column on the right is tuition.
I can't see it from here. What is it?
Where it says per student, very interesting, 12,400 for Neil Smith.
Oh,
Well, I was wondering about Coventry. Why is Coventry so much less?
there's a mistake. There's a mistake. We didn't correct this.
Thank you.
Somebody said the last time we did this, was it $1,400? We'll close down right now. We got it made. No, it's 14,000, yes.
The other question on this chart that I have, because you said that out of 559 students, there was only about 150 seats that would be open. But I'm looking at your chart, it looks like it's around 250 to 300 students would be open according to them. Bolton says 50 students that they would take, Coventry would take 100, Neil Smith would take 100, and then there was another one that said maybe, which was NFA 50 students. I just want to make sure that we're clear on the number.
Was that the initial or is that the final number?
That's the final number. I'll go back and check. Excuse me, I'll check it again. Interesting, the numbers went down from February to April. But the last time I could be wrong. Last time I looked at those numbers, I thought it was about 150 or 200. Okay. By the way, interesting in this case, and I did this for North Stonington, and Norwich Free Academy was one of the communities under consideration. They have a range of tuitions. They have a range from almost, it must be maybe $1,500, almost $2,000 variance, depending on what program a youngster comes into.
Did you look at, in this case, did you look at whether or not keeping a part of a high school open, like a STEM academy high school, and kids going, the ones that don't want to go to that, going to the outside schools. So I'm sure you would keep at least 300-400 kids in school for that.
That wasn't one of the options
Yeah.
that was given to us, Mr. Flores.
The options are clearly defined in the RFP, so we did not.
Oh, yeah, we can find that, we can find a new school, we got a lot of people in there. Let's be realistic. The third option to rebuild as new, correct?
Yes, we're going to get to that in just a minute.
Because I don't have time to go out of this issue. Let's be realistic. When we passed the middle school 20 years ago, that was very economical. And we passed only by 4 votes. Now, until this crisis, 2017, I'm going to vote yes. If you ask me for 100 million or 20 billion, I'm going to vote yes. No problem with me. The question is, you're the expert. What happened if the people voted down? What happened in the referendum to approve even 1 penny or 1 million, or I don't know the number? The question is, what happened if the people voted down?
I will tell you. Yes, thank you, Mr. Flores. Because working with Mr. Kalajian's group, the subcommittee of the Board of Ed, School Planning and Design, we've been talking about contingency plans, just talking. They haven't voted on anything, we haven't put anything forward, but there's been discussions. Some people took those discussions as gospel and said, oh, they're going to move the ECC kids over here and close the school. No, these are just discussions, but we're happy to answer those questions or tell people what kind of discussions they've been having. Anything to add to that, Paul?
No.
Nope. Okay. And they're meeting tomorrow night.
Yes, I want to listen.
So anyone who has any other questions about things going on that aren't in the purview of this study, whether it be Build Like New or anything else, that's the place to ask those questions. Yes, sir.
So in your discussion of contingencies, have you thought about the contingency of the magnet STEM school or something like that, a hybrid model?
No, because it's never been asked of us.
The scope of work included 3 items. Fully outsource all high school students and close Windham High School, demolish portions of the facility, and renovate like new. Those are the 3 items that we were tasked with.
For this group. I think some of those other options that weren't within that list
What
are,
you're referring to?
yes,
You're referring to other options, right?
yes.
Now, there's options beyond the original 3.
There's, no. This study was just for those 3 options. Any other discussions outside of this purview and of these consultants happen with Paul's committee, School Planning and Design. They're the ones who have been working on the master plan, and they're talking about, okay, how do we format, how do we want to renovate our schools, and we're pushing forward with the high school, but if this does not go forward, what are our options, especially when council wants us to get out of Kramer, what do we do? So those are the other discussions that have been going on.
Paul, can you tell us who's on your committee so that we know?
School Planning and Design Committee? Myself, Board of Ed, Tracy Lambert, myself,
Just 2 of you out of the board?
Dr. Sewell, are the regular seated members.
Okay, there's nobody from the community at all, teachers, anybody?
Oh, yeah. There's been,
Nobody sits on the committee as Board of Ed members, but Tyler Griffin regularly from the Board of Finance.
Right.
Regularly comes to our meetings this year and gives input and listens to what we have to say and purportedly reports back to the Board of Finance to keep us all on the same page. Anyone's welcome. These meetings are open and we have completely had open dialogue in all of them.
My question is from my side on the Board of Finance. I just heard what you looked at, the 2 or 3 options. The other option of looking at a STEM Academy High School, because of the one that we got on Tucky Road, and it's more regionalized for kids to come. We didn't look at that at all versus anything at this point because you weren't asked to.
as a magnet, that you're asking,
I don't care if it's a magnet, a high school, a STEM high school that you have.
well, STEM is
Regional STEM high school I was looking for. That's what our Board of Finance had asked when this committee was formed, to have that option looked at. And that's why I was here tonight, to see whether or not that option was even looked at. And I just heard you say no.
Can I just interject here?
Just one thing I want to point out is that there was one person in this audience who submitted written questions ahead of time, Kevin. So just on this vein, I think the relevant thing to ask right now is the second part of Kevin's 4th question, which you received ahead of tonight, which about the thought of a hybrid solution, which is a STEM magnet high school of some sort. So I think the question that people might want an answer to, if I'm hearing what people are saying, is if it wasn't considered by you because it wasn't in the official purview of the study, the second part of Kevin's question was, is this something that could be examined using your existing data?
I don't know who wants to answer that.
Yeah, Tracy.
Kind of dovetailing on both of those questions, in the June Board of Ed meeting, either late May or early June, with graduations and stuff, it's blurred together, the Board of Ed approved ed specs, educational specifications, for a STEAM high school, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. That is what we have purported forward to the state and to the public as what our high school is going to be. Magnet schools have been frozen, charter schools are not viable in a district like ours. Magnet schools have been frozen by the state. That is what we have put forth in the intent, from my opinion, I'm only one of 9 and I've been a member of this committee, but in the intent that the magnet school would then have a place to go. I wanted to clarify that. We approved that either late May or early June. I'm sorry the dates start to blur with graduations and stuff, but we approved that in a previous meeting already this year, that STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, would be the purpose of this high school going forward.
Mr. Brownberg, could you add that there's a moratorium on magnet schools?
Right, there's a state moratorium. It is no longer a viable option to open a new magnet school. New London got the bulk of those.
Thank you.
They got every magnet possible in the state. To answer your question, Tom, the process in school planning and design and answering and looking at options, as Kevin was pointing out, magnet regionalization, those were all examined in depth. And the reason they were put aside, we would love to be able to create a magnet STEAM in this town and draw from the surrounding communities, but we explored that option and were flatly denied by the state. We're flatly denied. You cannot do that. We will not fund it. We won't be involved. We couldn't do it. So, as Mrs. Lambert pointed out, the recommendation of the committee was a STEAM school that programmatically, STEM and arts in one building. Calling it an academy is just a nicety of verbiage. It will be a traditional single administration high school with a programming bias of science, technology, and the arts.
But I guess the question is, Paul, if that's where you're going, for me is, what's the cost of redoing the school? What's it building new on a property that you have here?
Building a brand new building.
On the property that you
Okay.
have here, what's the reimbursement?
We'll ask those questions, absolutely.
Okay, or you give that to them. If the kids don't want to come to a STEM high school, the way that you're producing it, where's the options for our kids to go if they don't want to do that type of high school? Is it just D.O. Smith at this particular point to go to the BOAG?
Right, because traditionally it was high school, trade school, or go to work. Right?
And some of our students go to magnet schools and charter schools out of district. North Valley Middle College.
Okay.
So, have at it.
Should I continue with the presentation, or should we move on to other things?
Well, wait, Mr. White has asked a specific question, so if you could approach that. Build a brand new building on this site. What would we get in return for that from the state?
Yeah, I know.
Tonight's meeting was supposed to be about. Tonight's meeting was supposed to be about the feasibility study. That's not fair to Bob.
Wait. Mrs. Lambert, please. This meeting was to encourage the community to come together and ask questions. Our consultants were going to do an overview, absolutely. But they have combined experience which can answer general questions from the community. There are a lot of in-between questions people have, and Mr. White's question is one of those. So the consultants were made sensitive to that need tonight.
I don't need a microphone.
Well, we have people listening, so you do.
Okay, thank you. By accident, I'm in the town council. And in the last meeting, we vote, help me out, Honorable, we vote, Charlie, help me out if I'm wrong, we vote to send application to the state to ask for grant money to build a new school or to rebuild it, correct? Now, that is an option that we vote. Maybe Dr. Garcia, help me out, what I vote for?
To renovate as new.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Honorable Garcia. But now, what you explain to me, State 1 and 2, when the town council already voted for State 3? That's my question.
Okay, let me answer.
That's my question.
To answer that question fairly, the requirement for the town council to make that resolution was a placeholder, because come this summer, the end of July, is it the end of July? June 30th. June 30th, the state is going to change the dynamics of reimbursement for all of its projects. So there was a strong potential that if we didn't have a resolution in place, we were going to lose money no matter what we did. All of that resolution did was to hold a spot in place so that we could go to referendum no matter what we decided as a community to do. Renovate is new is an ed spec and recommendation that went to the Board of Education. It was approved. It was just the existing language. It didn't tie us to anything. It didn't tie us to anything. So, Mr. White, would you like your question answered?
I don't care if he answers it now or
Okay.
in the presentation.
Okay, that's fine.
Just in the interest of process, I think that there are a number of people who have read through the study before tonight and understand it fairly well, but there also are a number of people sitting around who may not have, which I'm seeing heads nodding. So in the interest of inclusion, would people mind terribly if we let them finish the report, but speed it up a little, okay? It doesn't need to be as slow as it is right now. Speed it up a little, and then we can open it up to questions. Because jumping around like this, I think, is very confusing for the people who have to answer the questions and the people in the audience who are trying to follow. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so, here you go, Bob.
Thank you very much.
Moving on. Option 3, final costs, it was for savings of outplacement was around $150,000. Questions on the numbers? You want explanation?
What's she referencing?
The option 3.
Option 3?
So,
What numbers though?
the person who asked to go back to the slide, what did you want to know? Real quickly. Okay, you wanted to see the numbers. Okay, and there are some extra copies of the report lying around here too, I think. So we might be able to just give one to you if you can't see it that well. What's wrong with it? Somebody left a white Honda Civic left their car on with the high beams on, 00-CNST. So can we keep moving forward? Here's a copy of the report for you to take a look at the numbers, and then we can open it up to questions later. Thank you. Just keep moving.
Yes. So moving on from option 3, option 2 was to look at demolishing portions of the high school facility. This is right-sizing the high school for the population you have. The high school when it was built for around 1,200 students, grade 9s to 12. So we're looking at a maximum of 622. We rounded up to 625 students. Your existing school is 222,000 square feet. To right-size this school for the highest projected population in the next 8 years, the school would be 108,000 square feet. You'd have to remove over half of the square footage you have to fit the population you expect to have and get the maximum reimbursement from the state that you could. But in doing so, this is called an alteration project, there's no guarantee from the state that everything you do is going to be eligible, as opposed to new construction or renovate like new, where it's nearly all of it's going to be eligible. When we're estimating those, we say maybe 4% ineligible costs when we're looking at total costs. With this, you could be looking at 20, 25, 30, 35% of ineligible costs that bites into your reimbursement. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing, engineering. Okay. So we looked at portions of the facility that we could take away without significantly compromising the rest of the building. And that ended up being the gymnasium, one of the gymnasiums on the first floor. The pool was an interesting thing to look at because we have an agreement with Con Edison. I'm looking at Wayne in case I say anything wrong. There's an agreement in place with Con Edison where there's cogeneration where they use the heat from the pool to use in the building. And if we were to take away any of that, they may get into some penalties with agreements that we have in place. Again, we just put a new roof on this high school not too long ago. So if we start demolishing portions of the facility, we're going to have to give all that money back to the state, which is to the tune of nearly $3 million, I believe was our portion of that. So looking at other portions of the high school facility we could take offline would be the old shop wing. We are currently right here in the media center. So looking at those instrumental areas, the back wing, and then also the entire second floor. If we're trying to get rid of that much square footage, those are the kinds of things we're looking at in making alterations to this building. It's kind of counterintuitive. It's tough. But we did look at it and we did run some numbers. The other option is to renovate this entire building like new. Again, your population is about half of what you need, so how do we fill up the school to get more uses in here and try and bump up our reimbursement from the state? So that's where we were looking at bringing in a Leakey's group with early childhood, bringing over the Board of Education. We have to get out of the Kramer building. We've got excess square footage here. Why not bring them in? So, and then we looked at all the other good things that would do. This is just how the existing building lays out right now. The different colors are just the uses. So, for instance, Peaches corridors, you have your cafeteria, things of that nature. We all know that we've seen some of the issues we have here. Maintenance has been doing a great job with issues as they come up, but the facility itself is just tired. The systems are tired. They're going on 50 years old. So it will need a lot of tender love and care. So what we were looking at with the building itself, here again on the first floor, this being the media center, looking at taking a portion for early childhood where they could have their own access to separate them from the rest of the uses of the building so they would come in and out. They would have a protected area for a play space in the back, and then looking at other areas for the Board of Education with also some other uses for the buildings and grounds and giving them a little metal building off to the side here so they could have their facilities on one end of the building as well. So renovate like new project as compared to new construction. The state gives you an additional 10% reimbursement for renovating as opposed to building new. So your current reimbursement for new school construction, Windham gets 69.64%. To do a renovate like new, you get 79.64%. Town saves more money by renovating. It costs less to renovate. We're looking in the neighborhoods of $300 a square foot for renovation costs as opposed to building new in a neighborhood of $400 a square foot for building new. You're adding infrastructure. You're doing things you wouldn't have to do in a renovation project. Demolition, possible abatement, infrastructure, steel and concrete, things of those nature, which tend to drive up the cost. So again, if you were to build new, you build it for the maximum of 622 students. The thing with doing a new building is the state does not fund space standards the way they used to. In the old days, you go to build a new school, and you say, I want a cafeteria, I want an auditorium, I want a gymnasium. And now the state says, pick two of any of those three. You want to do a pool? You're paying for that yourself, for the most part.
And
So-
if we lose Kramer as a town, then we lose the ability to use that pool. So this would then be the only pool that could possibly be open for town.
That's a good point, Mrs. Lambert.
That's if we tore down this,
Yes, if,
you could leave that open though, so.
right.
You can't keep the pool without the cogen. The cogen's part of the building.
So the talk was if the whole Kramer block property is vacated and that pool goes away, this, you still have the pool at the high school that we want to use. So yes, you have an overabundance of space, but you have things that a lot of high schools do not have: a full-size auditorium, a pool, a gymnasium, an auxiliary gymnasium, and a cafeteria. Yes, sir.
You talk about three uses for the school, the high school, the preschool, and the Board of Ed. Does that 79.64% count for all three of those spaces?
No. They're looked at a little differently. 79.64 is the renovation for the high school portion of it. The Board of Ed gets half of that funding, gets half of the reimbursement.
Say 40% round numbers.
Yes, we'll say that in round numbers. And Aliki's group, early childhood, they get a 10% bonus, so they're up at 89%. So the bulk of the square footage is getting the 79%. Aliki's group is say, 30,000 square feet, they're getting 89, and the Board of Ed is about 22,000 square feet, so they're getting like 40%
So
roughly.
based on that, did you calculate what the cost to the taxpayers would be?
Yes, we have those numbers,
And that's coming up.
yes. So again, these are all the great things we're going to do when we renovate like new. We're going to make it green and friendly and renewable, and we can talk about that at another time. So based on everything we discussed tonight, as you've seen in the report, looking at these three options that were in our charge, we are recommending option one, which is to renovate the building like new. For cost reasons, for reimbursement reasons, and for just logical reasons, we didn't think to tear away this building, option two, to right-size it for the population was a smart move. You're going to get into so many other things when you're trying to take apart systems or just reface areas where you've torn out portions of the building. And with option three, Mr. Townsley, anything to add on option three, why we didn't think, we had talked about all that previously, that there wasn't a lot of host districts who were interested at this point in time. So option one, lower estimated cost to the taxpayers. We think it makes best use of the money. Also, and if we were to get out of the Kramer building, we would save, just on that alone, about over $250,000 a year in maintenance and energy costs and custodial costs. Yes, I'm done with that portion of it.
Okay. So just to backtrack 1 second, there may be some people in the room who don't understand the issue related to the Kramer building, and I just want to make clear that the town of Windham has sent a letter to the Board of Education informing them that they need to vacate that building, which houses the Board of Education right now and the pre-K programs that are run by the town Board of Education. So that's why, one of the reasons why that issue has been thought about, okay? We're going to open it up to questions, and yes.
I thought the way the format was, we're going to do the council and Board of Finance.
Oh, yes, right. Thank you for reminding me, yes. Okay, so we're going to open it up to questions now from members of the Board of Finance and the Town Council, which are the other bodies that are going to have to consider this, along with whatever the Board of Ed presents to us. And so I'm going to ask James Flores first. Go ahead.
Quick question. Who had the final say for the option? What board? Who had the final say? Who had the final say?
Who has the final say on the options? Oh,
Who had the final answer?
who had the final say on the recommendation that was made?
The three options.
Of the three options?
Yes.
Oh, who wrote the request for proposals?
That's not the question. The question I think James is asking you is who made the vote and recommended that we go with the option 1 to the board?
No, he's not asking that, okay?
Let me go back. Simple question. Who made the final decision? Option 1, 2, or 3? Who decided that? What board?
Okay, can people please, the first question that's being asked is, who made the final decision about what the 3 options that were considered in the study are, correct? Okay, who would like to answer that? Dr. Garcia.
They gave me the tough question. Just to clarify, it's the purview of the Board of Education to select option 1, 2, and 3. Part of the process is that the team have given the Board of Education a recommendation based on their study of option 1, 2, and 3. It's now the job of the Board of Education to look at that information and make a selection and a recommendation to the board. Chipton.
No.
There's 2 different questions. The RFQ written is one question. Dígame su pregunta en español.
Even in Spanish and English, the question very simple. You got 3 options.
Repítelo en español.
You got question 1, 2, and 3. Who decided?
Who decided what the...
Who decided of those 3? That was decided between the Board of Education and the Planning and Design Committee.
Okay.
And the Board of Finance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So, now,
Yes.
Tom?
I just want to make it very clear that
Can we just hold 1 second? So there is a question that's been asked, who put together the request for qualifications, which is what went out to elicit the study, which had these 3 questions. Who put that together? Do you want to answer that?
I can't answer that. I don't know who did that. Who put together the RFQ? That's the question.
Who put together the RFQ?
I believe the superintendent did through her office.
Should I answer this one? Yeah. Oh, please.
If you know the answer.
Okay. At the request of the Board of Finance, the chair of the Board of Finance at a meeting of the town requested from the school board that it would like to know what is the cost of sending students from Windham High School out to other districts. So that information came from the Board of Finance. Taking that information from the Board of Finance, the Board of Education staff developed the RFQ with some other options that have been floating around over the years. But one option, the option of outsourcing, of sending students to the school district, was a recommendation or a suggestion that came directly from the Board of Finance.
So,
Tom?
as the chairman of the Board of Finance, she is right. We did put that option 1 to look at that. But she's forgetting there was a lot more options that we gave them, which was option number 2, which was looking at building a high school as a STEM academy new, because this is not new for anybody that knows me in politics and been in the newspapers. I've been asking a question, if you build a STEM academy on the softball side of the field and the hardball, without tearing down this part, and without tearing down the gym, you could build a brand new school, what the cost that would be, because we could keep our gym, then knock the rest of this building down. That was one of the things that I had asked the Board of Education for out of my mouth at my meeting, and I asked that that be done at the committee meeting that they picked. I think the Board of Town Council put a committee together to do this. That didn't happen, so that was a part of everything. It wasn't just one thing that the Board of Finance asked for, so I want to make that very clear. But my question is right now, because I want to move this thing forward. Why didn't we look at the option of what I just said? If we built new, which wasn't tearing part of this or redoing, because I agree with him, you got pipes and everything else, there's a lot of things you're going to get involved with, it's going to cost you a lot more money. Could we have, because we own the land, we already have our water and sewer pipes here, could we have built on our property over here a brand new STEM high school here, or a high school the way that we're doing it for 600 kids? What
what would the cost of that have been? Because we could have kept the gymnasium, we could have kept the pool, because that's a separate part of this building. And then we could have torn this down. That's the piece that I was looking for me, but that didn't get done underneath the RFQ.
Okay, so we're not going to go back and litigate how the decisions were made, whether or not people agree with them or not. I think Tom, as the chair of the Board of Finance, very clearly stated what his understanding and many other people's understanding is of the situation. But regardless of that, I think Tom moved the conversation forward by asking the question, could that cost have been, well, regardless of whether it could have been, is that a possibility to cost out? Is that what you're saying at this point in time?
I'm looking at option 2 and what I heard them say, and what I also heard a Board of Education member say.
The cost of redoing the school and renovating it to bring it down to 600 kids is just too expensive, because you're going to have a lot more things when you're tearing the school apart. I heard that part. So is it cheaper to build a brand-new school, because we don't have to buy the land, it's here?
Okay.
That's all I was asking.
Okay, Tracy?
If we tear down this high school, we have to pay the state back for the entire new roof that we just put on it. The entire cost, because we just put a new roof on it 2 summers ago.
What's the cost? Tell me what the cost is. That's what I want, because for me, when this comes in front of me, I have to make a vote.
The roof alone was $3 million, so we have to pay that back regardless. Right. I'm sure that we can get the number for you, but the understanding of the people that are on the School Planning and Design Committee meeting was that this was to talk about the feasibility study and the 3 things that was set before the committee. There was a committee.
You guys want it done.
I was not a part of that committee. I was not appointed to that committee. I was told that that was what they were set forth to do, and that's what they did. That's what I was told this tonight would be about. We can have another forum and talk about numbers, and I think we should.
And I think if we talk after this meeting, and leading up to tomorrow night's meeting with School Planning and Design, I think if we agree upon what kind of scope you're looking at. Are you looking at the same size building, or are you looking at a smaller building? I can run some quick numbers, and we can discuss that tomorrow night at that meeting. You're welcome.
I think the footprint Tom might have been referring to is one that was the 600 student size. A new building, 600 student size on the land that the town already owns, keeping the gym and the pool area. Okay.
My question to you would be, do you envision in that model mothballing the parts of the building we're not going to use, or retasking them? We have a building with 200,000 square feet, so we have a pool, 2 gyms, an auditorium, utilizing those spaces along with as part of the new high school. That's what I'm hearing. But what about the remaining space?
Well, I think I was very clear. Keep the pool, the gymnasium down there, because that's a separate building, because you got a hallway that holds that off. And the rest, if you built new over there, you put an auditorium in, all of this here is gone. And put your ball fields back up here. So I would like to know what that would be, but I get it, that's for tomorrow night, but all I'm saying to you is, you guys got to have to look at every option out there, because the taxpayer wants to know what's the best way for them to go and what the best cost is for them to go.
Okay.
So I just wanted clarity. I simply wanted clarity about your idea. So we would have to create an infrastructure to support those spaces we keep, just heat, air condition, and the like. Okay, so that's an engineering component of it, and then the demo costs for the rest of the building. Okay, that's fine.
Murph, do you have something clarifying to add to that?
Well, if we were to do that, we also have the town's requirement to abandon the Kramer building, which means that we would also have to add on the cost of moving the preschool program somewhere, and moving the Board of Education offices somewhere. And the numbers that have been reported in the paper for doing those two things are less than it would cost to do those independently, because when you make that part of a integrated project in a single building, you get some economies from doing that, I think. Whereas if you did them as two separate additional projects, they're probably going to cost more than the numbers that have been reported in the paper. But we would have to consider those costs in addition.
Okay, is there anybody else who hasn't asked a question who would like to ask a question? Bernie, why don't you come up a little closer? And then I'll go to Tom. Come on up a little closer because there's a camera here. Okay.
Every day that goes by, something else is going to change. Right now, we're looking at tearing down the theater where the senior center was going to go. If you're talking about regionalization, and it's not going to happen with the people outside of us, because I'll tell you the truth, I talk to a lot of people in this town. People outside of this town don't want people from this town mixing in with them. That's it. They won't come out and say it, but it's true. They want to be left alone. They want their own little kingdoms, and they don't want to play that game. We need to survive ourselves. We need to regionalize within ourselves. We need to change the plans, the way the Board of Ed handles things, and the way the state tells the Board of Ed to handle things. Regionalize within the town. This is a town building, okay? We, the town people, dictate that. It should be that way. And we shouldn't have extra workforces. This building should be taken care of by a workforce that is combined in the town. No separate cutting of the grass by the guys from the Board of Ed. But I'm just saying, we need to take the money that we're going to get for the senior center and possibly move it into this and tell the state, shove it up your butt, because, you know, we're talking saving money. In the end, we probably will save a lot of money if we combine everything. You're talking extra space, mothballing and stuff. Let's put it together. Let's sit down, talk it out, and let's have a complex that's going to work together for the town. And you got a heat plant that's going to take care of all these buildings. You design it the right way. You got a big gas line coming in here. So let's think outside the box, everybody says. And we're not going to regionalize outside. They don't want us. Okay? So let's regionalize. Let's get everything together here and save some money. This is our one chance. This is a big sucker, and let's make the most of it, okay? And think about it. I mean, there's a lot of things that won't work, but, you're not going to get 100%. So let's save some money, sit down and talk about it, and put the arguments aside. But the whole idea is, people, some of the ways that the state has forced you to run this place are stupid, and we need to do it ourselves and do it the right way.
Okay, so I think what Bernie is putting on the table is a bigger question about stewardship of town resources, and there's a lot of talk being done at the town level about consolidation, for example, between the Board of Ed and the town on the finance functions, but there are talks about taking that further down the road, and that's a longer, bigger discussion. But that's a very interesting point to put on the table. I don't think we need to address it more this evening, though. But you're putting a challenge out to the town's elected leaders. Tom.
Thank you. I don't know who could answer this question, but in the presentation, there was discussion if we were building a pool, if we do the renovation, does that keep the gym and pool, or does it create a situation with the state where it's the exclusive use of for the school, for the pool? Because presently, it's kind of a town pool. They have Special Olympics here. There's other uses outside of the school population that use that.
Right, Tom, I think there would have to be an agreement about what happens during school hours versus non-school hours. With the new state security standards that came into effect after Newtown, there's a lot of recommendations, and there's a few you must do A, B, and C. So I think you can use it for community use, but probably not during school hours. I mean, if the senior's going to swim early mornings or afternoons or other activities going on, you can handle that through administration.
Tom, you have one more? I'm sorry, I didn't know you had another question. Go ahead. Here, take the mic.
I had two questions, but one, when you asked the questions of these communities, if they would take any of our children, was there any thought if we do this renovation, that we could take their children? Did we ever have that? We might send some of our children to their schools, some of their children for more regional opportunities. And the last question is just a lot of, no, the last question, third question was, everyone back here, I was unable, and I did call Park Collision when I couldn't make the last meeting. How do we get this nice bound copy of this report without downloading it online and having this, so, when you're sitting, talking to your wife, you can read it? I mean, when you're reading it.
Okay, so, yes. We can make copies, and how would people get them if they wanted them?
We'll mail them out.
But they need to request it from?
Make a request to central office and we'll get them to them, certainly.
Okay. But you had a question about
More or less sending children.
yeah, the question about the option of us being a receiving school.
That was not a charge to this group, and therefore it was not asked of any of those, but it may be something in the future you want to think about.
Is it something that's an option, though, for school to explore?
Well, there's two ways of answering the question. One, would you be a school district that's taking tuition-paying students? And quite frankly, then we'll go back to how many square feet you get, and I don't think the state's going to reimburse you to expand the school, therefore to charge others. And the other was, will you be looking at this building or some other building as a regional school? Therefore, that would be a combination of two boards or more talking about creating that and where it's located. But that was not the charge that we had.
I'll just add to that, Lynn.
Go ahead, Bob.
Tom, something that came up with the School Planning and Design Committee is that there was a governor's bill that was drafted in the spring, but it got kind of cut out at the last minute, where they were encouraging regionalization. Mary Glassman from CREC came up and spoke to School Planning and Design because we were considering just that. We were looking at neighboring districts and saying, okay, if they're going to encourage us to take students, what are the other districts that, we can hit them up for their high school kids? But unfortunately, and we
Get excited.
We got very excited. But unfortunately, that didn't come to pass. It's not to say that it won't come back in the future, but hopefully you've solved your issue by that point that it comes back.
Okay, I want to be cognizant of the fact that Kevin did submit some more questions, and so I'm gonna pepper his 3 other questions through the rest of this open mic session. Okay, so in deference to a person who actually sent them in ahead of time, there was a question that Kevin had about, it follows up on the question, well, I'll just read the whole thing. The high school choice option was discarded since the consultants could not get commitments through phone calls to superintendents for all of Windham High School students to attend other schools for the 2018 school year. However, no districts rejected our students and said 4 said they were interested, including E.O. Smith. But the real question that Kevin has right here is, in your opinion, with work and negotiation, could a tuition-out choice option be developed in a few years? If it couldn't be ready for the 2018 year, is that an option that could be pursued with more work over a several-year period?
Absolutely, yes. There are districts out there that, in my opinion, as I said earlier, because of declining enrollment, as one superintendent said to me, I've only got 40% of my seats filled. We need youngsters. So I think that's going to continue, and I think you'll find some of those districts not only eager to talk about it because of their needs, but secondly, now that they've had at least one discussion about this, they've had that discussion with their board, it may be easier for them at this point.
Okay, now I'm going to go back to our audience question, and then I'll go back to Kevin's.
Hi, my name is Bill Powers, live on Scotland Road in Windham. I guess just 2 questions. The first is, when you figure out the costs for option 1, what are you taking into consideration as the curriculum requirements? Is the structure going to follow what the curriculum ought to be, or is the curriculum going to have to fit into what the structure is going to be?
There's the board approved an ed spec.
How much does that affect the cost?
does that affect the cost? No, because at this point, we're working with conceptual numbers. It's basically square foot costs. We're not going into, laying out individual rooms and talking about 3D printing labs and stuff like that. No, at this point, it's a square foot cost to get you, once you get through referendum, then you'll put out an RFP to hire architects and engineers and develop, true plans.
Thank you. I've been going to many of the meetings over the years, and I quite frankly haven't heard a lot of talk about what I would call option 4 tonight. And I'm wondering, in terms of, and there's no crosstalk, but can anybody tell me where I can find that request for option 4 in writing? Is it in the minutes of the finance? Well, this is the one about building new. And, they said there was requested of this group originally, I think, that they look at that. Where is that written?
It never made it into the RFP for this group.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, but somebody must have requested it that it should be. And I'd like to know who, I can't crosstalk, sorry.
The Board of Finance made that request. It would probably be in the minutes of one of the meetings.
Well, I have looked and I didn't see it.
Okay, well, we'll try to get to...
I was looking for something else, but I haven't seen it. If somebody could tell me the date of...
Tom might be able to help you with that after the meeting, okay?
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And if not, get back to me and we'll try to, the superintendent or somebody, and we'll try to figure that out, okay?
Yeah, it just kind of seems odd to me that sounds like a legitimate request, and why, I'm trying to figure out why it wasn't considered as one of the options.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we're going to go back to one of the written questions, and then we'll go to Jean. You had your hand up, Jean? Okay. The question is, the reimbursement figures in this project are complex. In as broad terms or at range as necessary, what do you expect that this project will cost the taxpayers of Windham? You mean the renovate is new, Kevin?
Yeah, there are 3 levels of reimbursement, and so he said he was going to provide us with a final number.
Right. Is there a final number when you take into account all 3 of the different reimbursement rates for the different projects?
I can probably, if you give me a minute, if you go to the next question.
Okay.
I'll find it on the slide.
He's going to try to find it, and we'll get back to it next. So Jean, you're up next.
Okay, I have a couple of questions that need point of, informational questions. One is, what is the timeline on this? So if we voted on this in November and passed, would this be finished in August of 2018? No, then why are we telling early childhood education that they have to go find another place by August of 2018 when we're not going to have a location for them? Where do we think they're going? What was the town council, did they authorize this letter?
My answer to that as a member of the town council and the committee that discussed we discussed it, but we did not ever take a vote to authorize the letter being sent. Jean, do you have an answer, Bob?
Yes.
And then we'll come back.
Well, you said it was complex, Kevin, so I gave you a complex slide here. I'm going to try and walk you through this. So what I have here, this is how I usually do my estimating on my spreadsheet. So I have option 1, which covers renovations for Board of Ed, renovations for the early childhood, and renovations for the high school. That way I can break out the different reimbursement percentages they get. The high school gets, 79.64%. The Board of Ed gets half of what the high school gets, so they get 34.82%. And the Leakey's group gets 10% more, so they get 89.64%.
You call it Leakey's group early childhood.
The pre-K, I'm sorry. I know, I'm speaking in shorthand, I've been doing this too long. So early childhood gets 10% more than the high school reimbursement. So then I can take the square footage for each, I can apply the costs, come up with numbers, and then determine reimbursement based on, in the cases of the schools, I can, if they're getting penalties based on enrollment projections. Because like I said, if your building's half full, you're going to get half your reimbursement. That's the way it works. So, and the Board of Ed, you don't have to do that. They just get 50% of what everyone else gets. So here, adding all those together, option one is $112 million, and the cost to Windham is $43.6 million. Option two, which is an alteration project, so it's the reimbursements are 10% lower. So option two, I broken out into demolition, taking down portion of the high school, and then renovations. And in the demolition, I had a penalty for the roof, grant repayment on the roof. So with the option two, the overall project costs were less. It was $97.6 million, but the town's portion of that is $55.7 million. So the town's portion is higher. $43.6 million that the town would have to pay versus $55.7 million.
So your numbers have changed from the published numbers. So your numbers have changed since the published numbers.
Which published number?
The numbers you published.
In the report.
Okay, I'll have to see a copy of the report.
Is this,
This is the sheet that was in there.
Is this a different page that you're is this an updated page of the report?
Just give me the page number and I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, what page number is this?
Shouldn't have been anything changed. It should be the exact same thing from the report.
16. These numbers are all different.
16.
Okay, here's page 16. You want to put it on it's not the same numbers.
Okay, so there's a discrepancy.
$40 million versus $39.3 million. Yeah. They're very similar.
Yes, they're very similar.
Why are those numbers different?
So there's a question for people who may not hear what Kevin's asking is why is their numbers different?
this was April, I think this is more updated, this one you did it much more updated.
If I may,
Date on it.
on the high school renovation one, do you have on the demolition, do you have paying back the roof?
Yes.
There you go.
In this one.
Oh, yeah.
It's not in this one.
It's not in this one, that's the difference.
That doesn't account for the... No, it doesn't account, no, Kevin's right, it doesn't account for everything, but let me take a look at this and I'll get back to you.
Okay, so so this is a community discussion. People are raising questions. There's been a very observant question made about the report that some people have taken the time to read through before this evening and understand, and a difference between what's presented up here, and we'll try to get to the bottom of that, okay? Jean, you had I'm back to you, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Theoretically, yeah, unless somebody else. Actually, this is very related to my other question. So I'm hearing tonight that we were eligible for 79.9% reimbursement, which is what we've always thought. And then I read in the paper that we're actually getting it reimbursed at 56.6. And I think what I just heard is it's because we're not filling the whole school. Is that correct? So we aren't getting an 80% reimbursement. We're only getting reimbursed at 56.6 for the renovation.
That's only the high school. If we don't fill the whole high school.
Right, we're not going to fill the whole high school. We might have to abandon the second floor anyway, as it turns out, because you don't have the students to fill the whole high school.
Just one more?
Yeah, this is just my comment now, okay? So I was curious about those numbers. When I started reading the report, my first thought, and I didn't get too far, I got to the statement of the problem and the methodology, which is what Tom is bringing up. I would have asked the question, shouldn't we be asking about the quality of the education for our Windham students? That seems to be the most important thing, and none of this is important. Like James, I would pay a lot of money for quality education. People are sending their kids out of town. We are not doing anything to improve the quality of the education here that I can see, and it's a shame. I've advocated for the school for many years, but I just know so many people who have moved out of town, so many people who have sent their kids out of town. I think what we're seeing is the state and the federal government have been saying for years, if the school is failing, we're not paying for it, and we're not paying for this school. And I think that's the writing on the wall. I would just like to say that These numbers for reimbursement have nothing to do with the performance of the school district, correct? Yes. Okay.
The question then, what you could ask was, even if we spent all this money, that bring our children...
Well, that is, well, you're asking it one way. The question that I was going to get to next was, do you think that renovating the existing high school as new will result in a measurable positive improvement in test scores and other measures of academic performance for Windham students? Does anybody want to take that question on? The architect doesn't want to take it on. The superintendent...
All right, no, go ahead. Well, there's no research out there that I could find that would indicate that you would get increased scores. What you do find in some cases where they've done studies with Metco and others, that children who leave urban school districts that are deplorable, not doing well, and come to a district where there are programs and services, those youngsters can do better than they would in other places. I belong to an ABC program. If you ever heard of it, we bring in children from minority schools all across the country into our community. They live there for 4 years and they go to Simsbury High School. They all graduate from high school. They all get accepted to college. They all get scholarships. And we just had our 40th anniversary, and every one of them says, I couldn't have got this to Bronx. I couldn't have got this to Atlanta. But in terms of actually improving the quality of the building, only to the extent if you could offer services that you couldn't offer before. For example, if I'm saying your science labs, if your science labs look like they did in 1970, then you're competing against school districts that have science labs that were built in the last 10 or 15 years. Your youngsters probably can't compete.
Thank you. I see a question from Charlie, who hasn't asked any questions yet, and then James, and then Tom. But before we do that, Bob has an answer to the question that Kevin asked previously.
I'm sorry, I apologize. These numbers have changed since the report was put out for a couple of reasons. One, escalation numbers were changed. We did a most recent study, so we used it at this point in time, escalation going forward. Escalation, I mean, if you're planning a project now that you're going to do 3 years from now, you want to add in a factor to increase. And for escalation, we used, for the first 2 years, 3%, and for beyond that, years 3 to 10, 4%. So we're saying we're going to do this project 3.58 years from now. So we take, the first 2 years at 3% and following at 4%, and we come up with a number to add on. So that gets you to the middle of construction of where we think the market will be at this point in time. So escalation numbers change. And secondly, it was pointed out to us that when we were originally looking at this, we were looking at the old space standards from the state. And so because when we were originally thinking we were going to get this done earlier and and make a decision and get in our paperwork before June 30th, so we were using the last year's space standard numbers. So now this reflects making a decision, putting in a project now after July 1. So that's why your reimbursement, the cost of Windham has gone up since this time.
Can you read those numbers, because I can't read them?
Yes, okay. So the overall project numbers are exactly the same. It's the cost to Windham that has gone up. So for option 1, $43.6 million. And for option 2, $55.7 million. And the grant repayment for the roof was not originally included in the report either. So I apologize, I hope that clears that up. Dr. Sewell.
Murphy, you need to talk to the microphone.
But we did put in an application before July 1st.
Right.
So we should...
Nothing to do with this report, though.
Oh, okay. Except that the numbers we should be looking at should be based on last year's space standards, right?
No, because then you're comparing apples and oranges. If you're going to you can't go back in time and put in this.
You can't go back in time and put in, if you decide on option 2, say, you know what, we're not going to do what you wanted to do. We're saying go ahead with option 2. We're going to have to look at it, what's going to cost today, not in the Wayback Machine.
One is the one we've actually applied for.
Yes, but that has nothing to do with this report, essentially.
Okay.
It's a parallel path.
Okay, I want to remind people what we applied for is just a placeholder, and the vote that the town council took to allow that to move forward was based on that understanding. And the reason we're having this meeting and future conversations is to move forward and figure out as a community with everybody what works best for our community. Charlie?
I'm not real sure how to ask this question, but it kind of picks up on what Tom and Kevin have been saying. And my concern is, I'm a big fan of education that is not class-based or done by race. And this town is a plaintiff or intervener in the CCJEF litigation. So we've kind of, as a town, okay. Connecticut Citizens for Justice and Educational Funding, it's attacking the school funding formula because it's saying that districts that are poor, like Windham, are not on their own able to survive based simply on the property tax and stuff that we can collect here. And we often, also attendant with that, oftentimes are special needs kids, ESL students who require a lot of extra services just so that they can survive, and that we're ill-equipped to provide, and that in a sense violates the state's constitutional guarantee of providing students an equal education. So I guess what I'm hearing a lot about is numbers, but my worry is that if we reduce the size of the building, aren't we, in a sense, kind of solidifying the racial imbalance that we find in a school like this? And it's kind of works at cross purposes to what our town's position is, that regionalization really is a major key here. And to do that, don't we need more seats than to keep shrinking this school down? Don't we need to allow for some way that we can address some of these real concerns about the lack of integration in education?
That's a deep question. Does anybody want to start with that? Or Dr. Garcia? I saw you.
Well, if I understood them correctly, what I'm hearing, if I understood you correctly, is as you look at space and look at the building, this building, although it all has some features that do offer our students other opportunities, for example, the opportunity to learn how to swim, to be part of a swimming team, etc. What needs to be renovated are the science lab, the chemistry lab for them to be competing. So if I hear correctly, space is important. As you said, there's no research that said student achievement increase, but space do contribute to strengthening the culture of the school. And if you have a strong culture where students are very proud of their building, that enhances their social and emotional learning. And if they enhance their social and emotional learning, that will enhance their academic achievement. So like is a little chess game, and
Yeah. Sorry, that wasn't what I was asking at all.
I mean, that isn't, I understand what you're saying. I don't think that's a question that Charlie was asking. Does anybody want to take on that question?
Really, we were just talking about space
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for your question. What we were analyzing really was based off a space standard and student number. So square footage allocations to the students. So that's the way the state looks at it in regards to the reimbursement for the school construction. We didn't dig into programming or diversity or any of that because it was not part of our scope. What we were involved.
I wasn't questioning the focus of
right.
Okay, so he wasn't questioning the focus.
As a member of the town council and someone who has brought that, who's been so supportive of that litigation and voted to have the town involved in it, my concern is that we're missing something that the community has already bought into, which was the idea of integrated education, that bringing people from different cultures, from different areas, from different races, nationalities, is extremely important, and it's a major component of what makes an education valuable beyond the books and everything else. It's the social ability kind of context in which the education's provided, and it's not a fault of yours, but I guess my worry is I don't want to limit it just to a number of square foot and all this stuff, because otherwise I think we will fail in our duty to give the kids what they need here to compete, which is to be able to interact with people who aren't of their race or religion or color.
I see that. Tracy, did you want to say something? Yeah. Yeah, but Tracy had her hand up first. No, she has a response. And then I'm going to hand it over there.
I think, and I'm not positive that I'm answering it, as a committee, our purpose has always been to renovate this building as new. That is our first option. That is the most fiscally responsible. Keeping this building intact as it is now and moving Board of Ed and early childhood here, just let me finish before you shake your head no, gives us the opportunity at a later date to move the offices somewhere else if we have to. If we can get this high school as vibrant as I believe it can be. I believe our students here are succeeding. My youngest child, and my other two my youngest child is here currently as a sophomore. My older two have gone through. My oldest is employed full-time. My daughter is going to school and employed full-time. My son's classmate graduated from the Coast Guard Academy this year. One of the proudest moments of my career as a substitute parent. But I think that if we leave this building intact and move the Board of Ed offices here and early childhood to fully use this building, it gives us the opportunity when that correct mandate comes down and says you have to diversify, and those other schools who might not want our children for a myriad of reasons now are forced to send their students here. We have a big, beautiful, modern, technologically advanced building that those kids are going to want to go to because they're being forced in some cases, and their towns are going to have to pay tuition. Towns don't want to pay tuition to send their kids anywhere. But I hear it from STEM, which is where my son graduated from 2 years ago, from 8th grade, the sophomore now. How come we can't send our kids to your high school? Isn't your high school a STEM high school? My son took a step down in technology and services to come to this building, but I believe in this school district, and I believe keeping this building intact. We work with the rec department, and we use the pool for the older people and the swimming lessons and anybody else. We have gyms that do not get used 24/7. Is it going to be a little bit of a scheduling challenge? Absolutely. Has this town always risen to its challenges? Absolutely. We are graduating more students from this high school. The SAT scores are going up. All the other test measures are going up. The state has recognized us for that. We are out of the turnaround schools, thank you for the wording, I was trying to think of it on top of my head, that we have been for years. Closing the high school or outsourcing our kids or making it smaller also loses us grant funding, and that isn't measured into this report that you're looking at right now. So if we're saving $150, but we lose $100 in grants, we're only saving $50,000 to lose our identity as a community and to go backward in the progress we're making and sending our students to places they might not be welcome. Thank you.
Could I just make one quick comment about that?
Yes.
Just to respond for a second. For the last 10 years, I was responsible for the lottery system, the magnet schools attendance. We needed to have 7,000 applicants per year for our magnet schools, and that was my job. And if you think about it for a second, around Hartford, we have a lot of communities, Glastonbury's and Simsbury's. They said, don't go send their kids to those schools. Well, they did. And they are integrated at a 70% level, and they go there because there's something there that's not in their home school district. There's something there that demonstrated, which 3 years ago, the highest African-American students in middle schools and Latino kids in the middle schools was in the correct magnet schools. But it wasn't because it was a brand new building. In fact, most places we started with incubator space, which was corporation offices. It was because of what we did inside the classroom. I'll give you one further example. I was responsible for working with Great Path Academy, which was a high school which is on the campus of Manchester Community College. Those youngsters take high school and college credits. We had one girl go off to Brandeis as a sophomore. My point is, parents will make choices that take them outside their regional district if, in fact, what's there is exactly what they're looking for and they can't get it in their own home.
I want to, James has his hand up, and then, is there anybody who hasn't asked a question who would like to ask a question tonight? I don't want to pass you by, so, James.
Let me ask you slow motion this time. When Mr. White, that is a member of the Board of Finance, Dr. Garcia, and the Board of Education, when you're going to make the final decision? You got three options. I'm going to go slow, Mr. White, because you are the one that's going to make the decision, correct? You Board of Finance. Okay. I'm going to go slow motion, that way you can see my broken English. When do this committee going to make the final decision? Because I've been waiting 40 years to see something to happen. If that's a clear question, we want to translate it into good English.
No, it's a question. I think what you're asking now, there's been statements made throughout this evening and leading up to this evening, and conversations happening on the different boards about the need for a November referendum, which will take one of these choices or another choice to the voters. They'll take some choice to the voters. So maybe somebody should explain the decision-making process and timing of that to the group that's here tonight, because that would determine when that decision needs to be made and who makes it. Okay, does that make sense? Somebody needs to explain it. Murphy is the chair of the Board of Ed. Murph, do you want to? And then Tom.
Why don't we answer this? I'm here, the president of the town council is here, and the chairman of the Board of Finance is here, and all three of the boards have to participate in the actual decision. This is a community project. This is, the Board of Ed has a statutory responsibility for the education of our high school students, but it's the town's responsibility to make that happen. And I'm not an expert on the timing of how long it takes, but if we back up from the November election date, the Board of Finance has to act on setting a referendum date, correct?
It'll go from you guys.
We would send it to the town council.
There you go.
The town council would send it to the Board of Finance. The question is, on what time schedule do we have to send it to the town council? That means, when does the town council have to send it to the Board of Finance in order for you to be able to put it on the November ballot?
It would have to be to the Board of Finance, I would say, no later, so that you get it on the ballot in November. I would say you'd have to have it to us, because you have to have it published and everything else by no later than the third week, which is our meeting in September. That would be the latest, unless I call a special meeting.
Never done it.
Okay, but the question...
The Board of Finance by the third week. The board has to get the Board of Finance by the third week of September, all right? It has to come to you from the town council, correct?
So it's got to go to them before me.
So it has to go to the town council.
I just think that the most important concept to come to the town council, the most important concept to come to the town council, because we meet quite often. We don't go on summer vacation like the Board of Finance. But we meet, we could put on the agenda on our regular scheduled meeting, but the most important thing is to have extremely accurate numbers, not to find growing numbers or shrinking numbers, whatever it is. I think that's going to sell this project to the community, is having accurate numbers. And I think what Tracy said earlier was true, is, having a high school, small or large, having the opportunity to grow. I think Parish Hill will come here someday, because they're going to have to do something. And their population, because is shrinking. We're building with 600. We're not going to have 600 in 10 years from now, because we're all having less kids, so there won't be 600 here. There'll be less. So I think this is something we need to just move forward quick.
But I want to get back to James's question, is when the decision will be made about what that proposal is that will be brought to the town council and the Board of Finance. You have a clarification? That's not the question you're asking?
It's a question, but you answered too fast.
Oh, we answered, or I answered too fast?
Everybody.
Now, if we approve option 1 to the district, it's not our business, town council. If you're going to send kids to other town, we don't get involved. We, the town council, we get involved only in rebuild or build a school. Now, you sound like you already approved option 3 or 2. Now, the question is, that's what they say. They talk about a member. I don't want to have a member, because maybe this committee is going to pick option 1 to the district. If that's the case, we have no say. Now, the question I'm going to say is slow motion again. When portion 1, 2, or 3 going to be final?
That's
November.
what I just said.
No,
So- no,
because what happened if you pick number 1?
James, okay.
Okay, look, they have a subcommittee, okay, that made a recommendation, or a recommendation to the Board of Education. The Board of Education has decided on an option? Okay, so that's where the next step would be the Board of Education making the option. Then they would send it to the town council. You won't have a vote on a different option. It's going to be whatever they send to you, then it will be sent to the Board of Finance, who then will make a determination, whether the town council or us, one of us could say no and not send it out, or both of us could do that, or we could both say we're going to let the people decide. So that's where it would be, but it would be, James, no later than the 3rd week of September. Okay? Can I finish? Because I was next.
Wait, but there's a response, there's another response to that question, and then Tom, and then Dagmar.
Now that I'm painfully clear on what Mr. White's request is, the School Planning and Design Committee will certainly take that into consideration as an option we hadn't looked at. But, having said that, to respond to Charlie, who has since left, apparently, his concern about the flexibility, the cultural options, the value, the intrinsic value of our high school to our community, as Tracy was discussing. The School Planning and Design Committee, while over the past 4 or 5 or 6 years, looking at the disposition of this building and what to do because of the declining population, half the number of students in the building that it's designed for originally, was that space has always appeared to us to be an opportunity for us to do the things as an educational center for the community, a cultural center for education in this town. Now, placing board offices, they're just offices, and early childhood in this building were Hobson's choices. They were because Kramer was crumbling, decaying, and we needed to get him out of that nasty old building, one way or the other. The space is still available. We have a master plan going out into the future in which our design philosophy for the whole footprint, all of our buildings, all of our programming, is the most relevant, cost-effective, powerful educational outcome for our children, using the buildings and the facilities that we can utilize, that we have, without adding space, because we already have space in the middle school and the high school, as an example, and maximizing by air conditioning, utilizing those facilities that we inherited from the 70s, a fabulous auditorium, a pool, 2 gymnasiums, a facility that other places in this part of the state don't have, and maximizing that cultural impact in our town. That was kind of the broad philosophy that the committee has been working on. And then when you crunch the numbers and you start looking at transportation, outsourcing, and all those things that you've heard tonight, renovate as new, maintaining the structure seemed to be the best value to the community. And that's why the recommendation made originally to the whole Board of Education by the subcommittee to renovate as new was put forward that way with early childhood and town and board offices in the building when we do that. Those things change. There's fluidity in space allocation. But that has been our philosophy going forward, because we had this fabulous space, was to do the best we could with it for the whole community.
There's a lot of work that needs to be done. Tom, and then Dagmar and Dennis.
This last time I take the mic too. I have a question for Tracy, going back to what you had stated. But first of all, I think the answer that Bill's question that he had asked, which is a good question, and Paul just brought it up again. If you go back
to July of 2016. If you guys remember, that was our second or third time that our budgets were voted down. We had a meeting, and if you remembered, I had talked to, like I said, to taxpayers that were out there, and the frustration of, I believe at that time, we were looking at the school in Chaplin, talking about closing, going somewhere else, and the people were asking me, why aren't we looking at that? If you remembered, I brought that back to the meeting. I think, Bill, you were there. Okay, no, it wasn't Columbia, it was Parish Hill that I was talking about. Okay, so I came back to my board, superintendent was there, we're now in August meeting. This is where I said that I would like to have a committee put forward. I suggested somebody from the Board of Ed, Board of Finance, Town Council. But that would be the Town Council's pick as far as I was concerned. That they would set up and do an RFP, RFQ, superintendent volunteered to write that. She asked me in the meeting what I wanted in there and what I suggested to you here. This is not new for anybody that knows me. Even on the radio I've been saying this whole suggestion for 2 years. I asked for that to be put on here. Paul has had numerous conversations with me as the chairman of that committee of why that was not being looked at. And all he kept saying to me was, it wasn't in the RFP, RFQ. I said, why didn't your committee look at it? Well, they only had the RFP, RFQ, we met twice. So there was no other meetings for anybody to go to because they didn't call any other meetings. So I want to make it very clear, because my board's here, they've heard me 10,000 times about this issue. I've been very clear that this is where I want it looked at. But going back to you, if we do what you said, keep the school, I just want to make sure that I have it right, because you're telling me that if we move out of here, we're going to have to pay the grant we're paying for the roof. If we get some money for the early child care coming in, a reimbursement, and a reimbursement for the Board of Ed, if we move them out in 5 years or 10 years, do we have to pay back that amount? Okay? That's what I want to make sure that, so if you understand, we're locked in.
Wait, let's,
Yes. If the grant was allocated for a specific purpose, that purpose needs to be maintained for about 20 years.
Thank you.
20 years.
okay, the next person is Dagmar and then Dennis.
20 years.
Each year, though, gets reduced.
Folks have spoken about the possibility of Windham drawing students from outside towns. I'm wondering, is there a significant number of high school age students here in town whose parents aren't currently picking the Windham Public Schools? How many of those students, I know we have the tech school and the magnet school, how many of people are they, and why are they choosing other schools? And might any of these options address bringing them back in? I'm looking for specific numbers, demographics, and reasons if we know them.
Thank you, Dagmar. Does anybody know the answer to that? Yes, Dr. Garcia, or at least some of the answers.
I can answer part of your question. I do want to point out that 3 years ago, the enrollment of the high school was 523 students, 3 years ago. 3 years ago, the enrollment of the high school was 523 students. Currently, the high school have over 560 students. So we have increased enrollment at the high school level. Actually, we are seeing a higher increase at the high school level than at the elementary school. We are seeing when students are coming to us, they're coming at the middle school and high school level. Currently, we have 75 students at E.O. Smith. We have about 70 students at Tech, Windham Tech. We have about 8 at Parish Hill. We have 3 at Norwich Academy that will be graduating, so we don't have any more going there. And I don't have the exact numbers of how many we have that go to charter school outside of the district. I can get to that number, but we have numbers that go to charter school outside. No, not hundreds that go to charter school. But we have about 400 students total that go to the school, including middle school and high school.
And Dagmar had a question about, do we know any of the reasons behind why some of the parents have chosen these other options?
Oh, well, for example, Tech offer what we don't offer is a technical school, so the majority of the kids that go there want to go to a technical school. I don't know the choice exactly for E.O. Smith. I have spoken to some parents. It's some parents' choice, so different programs that they have. Parish Hill, parents said they like smaller classes, a very, 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 very small schools.
Yeah. Dennis, and then I think we had Susan.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm sorry I missed the earlier part of the meeting, but I did catch some of it on television. I did catch the statements made by my colleague on the town council, Charlie Critch, and then the follow-up from Tracy Lambert. And I have to say, in general, I agree with their sentiments. I am a member of the steering committee of the CJF litigation. And the CJF litigation isn't about integration. I think it should be, but it's not. It's about funding. It's about school funding. And I think the decision Judge Mukasher made that is now on appeal to the Supreme Court was, by and large, all things considered, on balance, an excellent decision. It certainly was very supportive of school districts like Windham, and I'm hoping that it's upheld on appeal. Integration is a different topic, but I think it's definitely related. And I, too, feel, along with Charlie and with Tracy and others here, that we need to keep the facility large, and we need to keep open the opportunity that because of improvements being made in Windham Public Schools now by the Board of Education, Dr. Garcia, the teachers, administrators, everybody, the students and parents, that we are going to be able to attract more kids from outside and more kids that live here that are going to school somewhere else are going to want to come here. Having a brand new state-of-the-art facility has got to help a little bit in that regard. I think years ago I met somebody who was a witness for the plaintiffs in Brown versus Board of Education in litigation that I did back in the 80s in federal court. And he told us that a town's reputation, a school system's reputation is vitally important. And if we send up a white flag and say, we want to send our kids to other towns, that's not good. That's not good to have a reputation for an urban center in the state of Connecticut. And I've lived in urban centers all my life, in New Britain and here in Windham, to say, oh, we're going to send our kids to Chaplin and Mansfield and whatnot. We already have an example right here in the town of Windham that kids from the surrounding towns, that parents wanted to send their kids to our magnet school on Tucky Road because it's a great place to go to school. And there are kids there, and it's helping to integrate our public schools, and we need to do that. Okay, so I'm all in favor at this point, and I worked very hard along with other members of the town council to get this matter. In fact, I talked to the attorneys for the Matt Ritter. I talked to Matt Ritter, who works for the attorneys who represent the school board, about this, and we made sure that we got this done in time to get the application in. And I think that I want to commend everybody here today. This has been a great presentation. Leonard, you've done a wonderful job of chairing, as you always do. And the people from CREC have done a wonderful job of making the presentation. This has been a fantastic night for the town of Windham. And I couldn't stay home and not be a part of it. I had to come here, especially after I heard Charlie and Tracy. And I think, I'm all in favor of option number one at this point. And I think that is the option that's presently in the application. So I think it has an edge so far. I'm not sure about the legalities of that, because this is new ground for me. I'm town attorney several times, but I've never been an attorney for a Board of Education. I think this is a great night, and I want to say things are looking up, and we are moving forward, and we should feel positive about this. And I just am happy. I know things are going to get better. The question is how much better. But we need to work together. This town needs to come together behind Windham Public Schools and make our town and our school system all that it can be. And this is a great jumping off point. Thank you very much, everybody, for your participation in this proceeding.
Thank you, Dennis. We have our state representative, Susan Johnson, here.
Thank you so much, and I have to also echo Dennis's thank you for all the good work that everybody's been doing. And, some of the best things that we've been able to do in this community have come out of these community conversations and getting people together. The Barrows Academy is one of them. Our liaisons came out of a community conversation. One of the things that I was proud of sitting in the committee, in the education committee at the Capitol, is the fact that we had liaisons before we even discovered them at the Capitol. So So we've done a lot of great innovative things here. We should be really proud of all the work that we've done, given the resources that we have. And we need to continue to try and make sure that we get more resources, and I've been working on that at the Capitol. The governor is supportive of that as well, but we have a lot of communities that feel that they're somehow entitled to more than we are. And so we have to be part of that discussion at the Capitol, and we have to make a lot of noise here too, and tell the governor, tell the people at the Capitol what it is that this community needs. We have a great community here, we have wonderful diversity, and we also have been able to do the early college program, which is one of the reasons that this high school, I think, has been able to attract more students back here. And it's about the programming, as the people from Craig said. Programming is what will attract the students. The building, yes, has to be updated, but the programming, if you provide the programs and the opportunities for students to do the things that they're interested in when they're in high school, so that they can go out and get a job, so that they have something that they can start out in this economy with, then in that circumstance, we'll be able to attract lots of people. But we have to have those programs, and we started that, and I think that, I've suggested some ideas before in the past, and I guess I'll suggest it once more, and that is to have the VOTEC school be part of the same campus here. And that would be one way to attract lots of students into this building. There are about 500 students. We're about a little bit more than 550 students. So we have the capacity here for that. We could also add on to the high school for that, and make sure that we have the right kinds of shops for the students. I could do that. So that's another suggestion that wasn't part of the packet that was part of the evaluation. They do it in Maine. They have 3 combination regular high schools with VOTEC schools in Maine, and I've been invited to go visit them, and if somebody wants to come with me, I'd be glad to go up and bring you all, whoever's interested. But in any event, I'll drive. Anyway, I just want to thank you for your work, and I think that moving in terms of, some programming, additional programming is the way that we need to go, and that, I think, will help us a lot.
Thank you. I'm feeling the energy in the room. I feel like people are sort of getting to logical end to this. Are there any final questions that people want to bring up before we break? Yeah, but before, questions first. Any questions? Questions? Oh, Tom?
Sue just brought something up. Have you, in your committees, looked at that suggestion of trying to bring the tech school up here? Okay, I'd like to hear that answer.
I attended a meeting with Ms. Johnson and the Secretary of Education, or the Commissioner of Education. I get the title. And she would have none of it. I sat down and said, it's going to cost the state over $100 million to build a new building for Windham Tech. It'll cost them, what does it say there, $70 or $80 million to renovate Windham High School. Okay? You put those two things together, $180, $200 million. We could put those two programs into this facility for less than that, have the state pay for it all. If the Windham taxpayers pay for nothing, the state would still save $20 to $40 million. Not interested. Well, but the point is that this building is 47 years old as we stand here. This project, when we started looking at it about 4 years ago, is in the 90s of millions of dollars. Now it's over $110 million. If we keep waiting, it'll be $120 million. We're going to have to do something about this building soon. Okay? The building, as Mrs. Lambert pointed out, if a student graduates from the STEM Academy in town and comes to Windham High School, they have a science lab that's not as good as the one that they had in the 8th grade. It was also mentioned by Mr. Roach earlier that this building has a lot of difficulties in meeting the state's current security standards. In fact, I don't think it's possible for this building to meet the state security standards, really. There are a number of places where the building needs to be brought up to code. I mean, it's 47 years old. We're going to have to do something. I submit that we have the best opportunity to do something now, this summer, and that the schedule that you gave us earlier suggests that the Board of Education is going to have a special meeting sometime in mid or late August to define a project and forward it to the town council.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up. Okay, it's on. Oh, you are, okay. So Susan, one more thing.
About the VOTEC idea, and that is, somebody just mentioned that the superintendent who was really against the VOTEC, the superintendent of the VOTEC schools was against this. But the commissioner was, so-so, but I think it had to do more with the superintendent of the VOTEC schools than perhaps the commissioner. And the other thing is just this last session, we passed legislation to separate the VOTEC school from the State Board of Education. So there will be a separate entity, and it will be new ground that we'll be making in that particular area. So it might be a chance to get in on the ground floor, make the suggestion, meet with the governor, and do that sort of thing to see whether or not this has any legs at all.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm going to hand it, who from the Board of Ed is going to close this forum? Yeah. I just want to say, I want to thank everybody. I think that this was a very civil conversation, and I just want to say that as the mother of 3 children who went all the way through the Windham Public School System, who are all now in their 20s, and I loved their experience, they loved their experience, and my middle one is a teacher in the school system. She wanted to be one since she was in 1st grade, and she is living out that dream now.
Again, thank you all. This is a little divergence from the way we usually run meetings, and hopefully we will continue this. The school planning and design subcommittee of the Board of Education, you've heard referred to a number of times tonight, is meeting tomorrow night at Kramer at 5:30. Please come. The agenda, it's a working committee meeting, so the agenda can be a little bit fluid. Our agenda tomorrow night is discussion of relocation of pre-K program, and feedback from tonight. So, doesn't mean we won't talk about the high school, but you're welcome. Susan, do you have a moment?